What would Marcus Aurelius do if he were in your place? You didn't choose the world you were born into, but you can choose how you respond to it. Maybe you're at a point where everything feels heavy, where every decision comes with doubt, where the silence of the world echoes louder than any advice. Maybe you're feeling that kind of loneliness that has no name, not because you're alone, but because no one seems to understand what you're carrying inside. It's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from the body, it comes from the soul. And even surrounded by information, voices, people, you feel like something is missing: solid ground, direction, meaning. And in this place where certainties vanish, you ask yourself, what do I do now? But maybe that's not the real question. Maybe the truer question is, how do I keep going without abandoning myself? Because it's not about which path to take. It's about who you become as you walk it. It's about not losing your dignity, even when the world tries to bend you. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by war. He lost friends. He was betrayed. He carried the weight of an empire, but he never stopped writing. He wrote to himself in silence, on cold nights, to remember who he was, to remember that the soul can remain firm even when everything outside is collapsing. He didn't write for the world. He wrote because if he didn't, he would forget his own name, forget his own center. And when you lose your center, any breeze becomes a storm. You're not an emperor, but you feel the same pressure, the same restlessness, the same desire to run away, the same longing to be calmer, stronger, more lucid. And maybe you wonder, what would Marcus do if he were here, in your place, with your pain, your doubts, your story? He wouldn't bring magical answers, but he would bring presence, breathing. A calm question that lights you up from within. What I'm doing right now, is it aligned with who I want to be when this is over? He didn't seek perfection. He sought steadiness. And steadiness is not rigidity. It's choosing the inner truth, even when the world offers easier versions. Marcus didn't want to control others. He wanted to not be controlled by himself. And that is the hardest practice, because the real enemy is never outside. It's in your reactions, your pride, your fear, your haste. And overcoming that enemy takes silence, clarity, coherence. Even when no one sees it, you may be in a moment where everything feels confusing, but inside the confusion, something of yours still remains. A voice, a breath, a pulse. And that's what you need to listen to, not to find the perfect path, but to remember, even in the fog, you can walk with dignity. You can remain whole. You can be emperor of yourself, even if the empire seems in ruins, because the true throne was always inside. And no one can take it from you, the emperor who never fled from himself. How Marcus Aurelius faced pain instead of denying it. He wasn't a distant hero. He was a man at war, outside and inside. While leading armies, enduring betrayal, and mourning his children, he wrote, not for others, for himself. He wrote in private journals, short phrases, direct, brutally honest, because he knew that if he didn't write, he would flee from himself, from the pain, from what he felt. And fleeing from yourself is the first step to losing everything. Marcus Aurelius lived under pressures that would crush most, but he didn't harden, he didn't turn to stone. He made his words a mirror, a temple, a shelter. Instead of denying pain, he named it. Instead of pushing it away, he welcomed it. And that rare, counterintuitive choice is what made him strong, because the strength that impresses comes from the force that doesn't pretend. You feel pain too, maybe not like an emperor, but like a human being. Pain for not being understood, pain from carrying too much, pain from not knowing if you're doing the right thing. And many times you try to silence it with distractions, with work, with justifications. But what Marcus teaches is simple. Pain only becomes clarity when it's faced with presence. It only transforms when it's accepted as part of you. He didn't seek comfort, he sought coherence. He knew that running from pain only prolongs it, that resisting what you feel multiplies suffering. So he looked at his soul like a battlefield. No decoration, no denial, just respect. and the courage not to flee. You can do the same. You don't need to write like him, but you can ask yourself now, what inside me am I trying to ignore? Maybe it's an old sadness, a fear left unresolved, a guilt never spoken. Observe it without judgment, because what isn't seen dominates, but what is welcomed dissolves. Picture an emperor closing the palace door and sitting in silence, without armor, without a crown, just with his soul, and saying, I'm here, with everything I feel, with everything I still don't understand, but I'm here. That presence is the beginning of everything, because real power was never about external control. It was always about not abandoning yourself, even when everything outside begs you to. The mind as a battlefield. Marcus's greatest enemy wasn't Rome, it was himself. When the world seemed to be in flames, Marcus didn't point fingers outward, he turned inward, not because he was indifferent to the wars he faced, but because he knew the most dangerous war is the one fought in the mind. That's where fear is born. That's where anxiety grows stronger. That's where reality begins to distort. And if you don't master what happens within, what comes from outside will easily bring you down. He didn't seek a perfect mind, he sought a trained mind. Just as a warrior sharpens his blade before battle, Marcus sharpened his thoughts. Every day, with discipline, with attention, with humility, because he knew that the mind, when unguided, becomes an enemy, and that thought, when unexamined, becomes noise. Today, you are surrounded by voices, by comparisons, by relentless doubts. Your mind isn't tired because it thinks too much. It's tired because it thinks without direction. And this is where Marcus offers a map, a call, a reminder. You can organize the internal chaos. You don't have to believe every thought that arises. You can observe, you can question, you can choose which thoughts deserve a home within you. He wrote so he wouldn't go mad, to remember what was essential, to not be swept away by emotional currents. He knew the mind needs structure, focus, silence, training, not as rigidity, but as protection. You can, starting now, choose a simple phrase, a phrase that guides, that anchors, that calms, and repeat it at dawn, not as superstition, but as alignment, like a warrior checking his armor before heading out. Because if your mind is clear, the world outside may try to wound you, but it won't break you. Picture someone who, every day, before facing an empire, sits in silence and writes, "Today, I will be just. Today, I will be steady. Today, I will not be dragged by others' emotions." That is discipline, that is presence, that is practical wisdom. Your mind is your home, and if you don't care for it, anyone can enter. Any thought takes hold, any criticism becomes law. But when you choose to cleanse, to select, to build structure, the war may still rage outside, but inside you've already won, because you've become master of your own space, and that no one can invade. Win without winning. The power of not reacting the way the world expects. Not every victory needs to be visible. Not every reaction needs to be a response. Marcus Aurelius understood early on that true power isn't in imposing, but in not being contaminated, in not becoming what you fight, in keeping the soul intact, even when the world around you pushes you toward noise. You felt this, the urge to retaliate, to defend your position, to prove you're right. But in the impulse to justify yourself, you lose your center. And often, you also lose the silence that upheld your dignity. Because reacting as expected is exactly what the manipulator wants. It's what the provocateur provokes. It's what the world wants, for you to lose yourself just to join the ego's dance. Marcus wrote about this with clarity. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, and this is not weakness. It's maturity. It's choosing firmly where to place your energy. It's understanding that serene presence, even in chaos, is a kind of strength few can endure. You don't have to stay silent forever, but you can choose when silence is wisdom, and when words are just noise. You can choose not to accept every invitation to conflict, not because you fear the fight, but because you already know that some battles are guaranteed losses of the soul. Think of the most recent situation where you felt attacked. You were right. But did you really need need to react? Could maintaining your peace have been a deeper response? Sometimes not winning is the real victory. Sometimes staying whole is more powerful than winning the argument. Imagine a torch. It shines, it warms, but it doesn't burn indiscriminately. It doesn't leap at everything that provokes it. It exists with purpose, with presence, with firm silence. And that's how Marcus would have reacted, not with superiority, but with choice, with discernment, with the courageous decision not to be shaped by what is small. You can win without winning, because winning is not defeating someone else. It's not losing yourself in the process, and that no one sees. But that's what makes you greater, not in the eyes of others, but in the eyes of your own soul. Every pain is a test of alignment. Marcus didn't seek comfort. He sought coherence with his daemon. You feel the discomfort, that sensation that something inside is shifting, something no longer fits, something is calling for change, but also brings fear. It's a quiet pain, but constant, and everything in you hesitates, because changing hurts, and staying also hurts. And in that crossroads, the soul screams silently, which pain is worth it? Marcus Aurelius didn't see pain as an enemy. He saw it as a signal, a compass, a test. Pain was where he asked himself, am I being true to what I believe, or just comfortable with what I know? Because the Stoic doesn't seek relief. He seeks alignment, even when that alignment demands sacrifice, even when it means letting go of what once felt like shelter. Today, you may be standing before a difficult choice, to stay or to leave, to yield or to hold your ground, to continue out of loyalty or to end out of truth. And pain in that decision is not the obstacle. It's part of the process. It's proof that you are moving with presence, that something in you no longer wants to betray your own consciousness. Marcus chose coherence even when it meant loneliness, even when it meant leaving behind what was comfortable. He knew the soul is strengthened in the friction between what is easy and what is true. And each time he chose truth, even painful truth, he became more whole, more calm, more steady. You can ask yourself now, what am I avoiding out of fear of disappointing someone? That question reveals, because almost always what you avoid is exactly what most needs to be faced, what most needs to be lived. The pain of decision is the pain of the birth of a new version of you. Picture a ship leaving port in the fog. It doesn't see land. It doesn't know exactly where it's headed, but it goes. Because it knows staying at the dock is no longer an option. Because staying would mean betraying the call, and betraying the call is betraying yourself. Marcus didn't seek security, he sought meaning, and that is what moves you now, even with fear, even with pain, because in the end, the pain that comes from an honest choice always heals more than the comfort that feeds the void. The void also teaches Marcus's silence as a space for strengthening, not despair. There are days when everything feels barren, affection cools, the senses dull, certainties disappear. It's an inner silence that doesn't comfort, a kind of emptiness that scares you, and your mind screams, something's wrong, but maybe it's not. Maybe the void is exactly what you needed to feel right now. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He wrote not just to understand the world, but to endure the silence of his own inner world. He faced the void like someone faces winter, with respect, knowing that beneath the dry ground, invisible work is happening. Knowing that what looks like pause might actually be preparation. In your life, this moment might be happening right now, a time when nothing answers, when no choice feels right, when everything seems too still, too slow, too dark. But what if this isn't the end? What if this is the interval between who you were and who you're about to become? Stoicism teaches what matters is not what's happening, but how you choose to go through it. And the void, when not resisted, becomes fertile. It shows you what remains when everything falls silent. It reveals what still pulses without stimulus. It separates what's essential from the noise. You can pause now, not to escape, but to listen. Feel your own body, feel your own silence. Breathe for a few minutes without looking for anything, and ask yourself, what still lives here, even when everything else seems absent? Marcus did this, not with formulas, but with courage. The courage to be with his own emptiness without trying to fill it. The courage not to rush out of the darkness, because he knew the deepest growth doesn't happen in the light. It happens underground, in the invisible, in silence. Picture a field that seems abandoned. No flowers, no sign of life. But beneath the surface, roots are moving. Slowly, quietly, building what will one day be seen. That's what the void is like. It's not punishing you. It's preparing you. Marcus didn't fight the void. He accepted it as part of the path, and you now can do the same. Not because it's easy, but because it's real, and everything that's real, even if it hurts, teaches, and everything that teaches strengthens, quietly, deeply, permanently. You are not an emperor, but you can rule yourself. Marcus Aurelius didn't leave formulas. He left presence. In the end, what Marcus left us wasn't answers. He left reminders. Reminders that even in chaos, you can remain whole. That even without knowing what comes next, you can walk with dignity. That even when everything outside collapses, something inside you can still remain standing. You may never command armies, never sit on a throne, but the battle happening inside you, between fear and truth, between impulse and serenity, is just as real as any ancient war. And the victory that matters isn't in grand gestures, it's in the quiet decisions. That one word you choose not to say, that path you decide not to take, that old habit that today you choose to let go. Marcus faced betrayal, loss, and pressure, but he faced it all by writing to himself, reminding himself every morning that peace doesn't come from outside. It's built from within, through choices, through discipline, through loyalty to what is just, even when justice seems naive. You can do this too. You may not control what happens, but you can control what you allow to grow within you. You may not stop the storm, but you can choose not to surrender to it. You may not please everyone, but you can sleep peacefully with who you're becoming. Picture an old general walking alone, the city in ruins, night falling, the future uncertain, but he walks. Not because he has all the answers, but because he knows who he is, because every step is not driven by haste, but by clarity. The clarity that continuing with truth is more important than arriving first. That clarity is now in your hands, not to give you certainty, but to remind you you can rule yourself with steadiness, with compassion, with integrity. And when you do, you'll realize that the most powerful throne in the world was always inside your silence, and that reigning over yourself with courage and truth is the noblest act anyone can choose.